For those of you watching at home, we just had this great debate over are we live or not. Then I promptly decided to talk, and you saw a wonderful mouth moving with absolutely no sound. That was because I am deathly allergic to body mics. Okay, let's bow our heads in prayer, and then we're going to spend our time tonight in Isaiah 34 and 35, which are just, in terms of just wonderful chapters of the book, these are a lot of fun. There's a lot of crazy stuff going on. So let's bow our heads in a word of prayer. Oh, loving God, you continue to go with us throughout our journey. Lord, as we journey through all kinds of crazy adventures that we cannot see the ending, continue to keep us focused on the hope that is in you. Bless us as we wrestle with these words given to us through the prophet Isaiah. Open our eyes to see you better. In Jesus' name, amen. So thinking back, we're down to the final 3 weeks. And at this point, I don't have to use GPS to get here from my house. Given the fact that it's a whole whopping 4 turns, that's not that impressive. So thinking about what we've been dealing with, what are some of the images of hope that we've seen so far in the book of Isaiah? Mountain. Mountain. So we've had a mountain. We've had a feast, because I don't want to spell banquet. Remember, spelling has nothing to do with intelligence. And a spelling bee is one of the cruelest things you could ever do to children. Okay, revealing my own childhood trauma probably. Other images. That day. Yeah, I was telling my Hebrew reading students on Monday, which I guess was only yesterday now. Yeah, we got into a lot of that day stuff. We're doing the book of Amos, and I was like, oh, that day. And they were looking, 8 o'clock on a dreary Monday morning. They weren't that perky for some reason. But we've had that coming day talk, other images of hope we've seen. We've had the nations. We've had this great gathering of all the people. And where do they gather? Don't forget Zion. Zion is the dominant image, and that's my German Z to try to impress you to be properly intellectually snobby. And to impress my son's German teacher, who is great but terrifying. He terrifies even me. What's going on with Zion? What have we learned about Zion throughout this? Because Zion has been a really important image in Isaiah. It's where nations, that day, mountain, feast. All will gather at. And the other thing would be teaching and peace. And that idea of radical peace. That peace that really, to use that line, I don't know if it's the custom of this church, but in many churches, may the peace that passes understanding keep your hearts and mind. Blank stares, okay. Well, Chris, yeah, okay. Yeah. I do love how those refrains just stay with us. That's why I love doing shut-in visits. All I have to do is go straight to the confession and TLH page 5, and they say it with me even if they've been unresponsive up until that point. It's just one of those cool pastoral moments. So we've seen some significant language, lots of hope. I left you at a bit of a mountaintop. We had our dragons. With Isaiah 27, verse 1, we had a restored vineyard at the tail end of 27. And then somebody bust out 28, verse 1. Because to continue another theme that has evolved in our time together, we need to sue Isaiah for whiplash.
So 28, 1?
Yeah, 28, verse 1.
The proud crown of the drunkards of Ephraim, and the fading flowers of its glorious beauty, which is on the head of the rich valley of those overcome with wine.
Yeah. Isaiah has taken us from this wonderful height of God's victory at the end of the age, and now he's back in the muck and the mire of his own time period. 28, 29, 30, and 31. So those 4 chapters. 1, 2, yeah, that's 4. Good. I can count that high. Are all about really events in Isaiah's day. We talked about that in 7. He had the issue of what to do when Aram and Israel are ganging up on you. The issue there in 28 to 31 is, what do you do when Assyria is coming? And the answer is, don't go to Egypt for help. Two major verses to look at there. As Isaiah, in the midst of really dealing with events that you don't have you never had a Star Wars shirt on. A long time ago, a galaxy far, far away. I'm never going to let you live that down. In the midst of all of these crazy politics where Isaiah is dwelling, and the issue with politics and Isaiah, and the issue is, do you go to Egypt for help? And the answer is you don't. Because one, Egypt is a dumb helper. They may talk a good talk, but they're going to hang you out to dry when the chips are down. Two, why do you think it's so bad to go to Egypt for help? So that's something we've actually seen throughout Isaiah. Depending upon your own brilliant political mind, Isaiah just blasts repeatedly. If you go to Egypt, stay tuned to Isaiah 35. But the key text, Isaiah in a nutshell, is Isaiah 30, verse 15. This is never a memory gem of any memory work that I've had to learn or my kids have had to learn over the years. My daughter particularly enjoyed her memory work for this morning because it's the hymn that I absolutely despise, so she was singing it all the way to school just to taunt me. 12-year-olds are evil, sort of. But Isaiah 30, verse 15 is an absolute key text for understanding what salvation looks like. Somebody bust out Isaiah 30, verse 15.
For thus says the Lord God, the Holy One of Israel.
Okay, pause right there. Okay, thus says what? Lord God, Holy One, Israel. We are in trouble here. Could he have just said, thus God said? Or simply, God said? Why do you think we've had this piling on of titles? So it's the Lord Yahweh, Lord God is what most of our English translations have. This is this got me in trouble at a sermon I preached on Sunday, but I'll use it here. Hopefully nobody's offended. This is a shut up and pay attention moment. Apparently you shouldn't use the word shut up in a sermon. Learned that on Sunday. Whoops. This is a slow down. What's coming is super important. Everything God says is kind of by definition important. Duh. This is Nikita Khrushchev at the UN pounding his shoe moment of pay attention. Okay, keep going.
In returning and rest you shall be saved. In quietness and in trust shall be your strength.
Okay, pause right there. Yeah, you've been around me enough to know that I very rarely let people get 3 words in edgewise when it comes to reading a text. What jumps out at you in how salvation is being described here in 30:15? In returning and in rest, you shall be saved. In peace and
You're not doing anything, you're just being quiet.
How's that for an image of salvation? Salvation is all about us doing nothing. One of the great images of salvation is trusting that God's going to take care of you and not running around trying to do stuff on your own. That, my friends, is something very easy on paper. Yeah, I mean, what's hard about that language? In returning and rest, you'll be saved, and peace and quietness will be your hope. Pastor McDowell, read the final bit of the verse.
But you were unwilling.
Yeah.
And you said, no, we will flee upon
Yeah.
horses.
But yeah, pause right, end right there. Throughout all of this book, throughout all of our lives, God's giving us where hope is. And what's hope? Not trying to do anything, trusting that God's going to take care of us, which is so wonderful and so bloomin' stinking hard. And then the tragedy there is, but you did not desire it. That's the tension that's been existing throughout this entire book. God says, look, what's salvation look like? trusting me and not trying to fiddle with the Assyrians or play around with the Egyptians or run after some stupid idol. Well, and now I said stupid and shut up. I'm on a bad roll tonight, aren't I? I'm scandalizing everybody. It's all about just slowing down and listening. Anything else that strikes you? Isaiah's message in a nutshell is Isaiah 30, verse 15. Our invitation in the midst of craziness is to hang on to hope and to know that no matter what happens, we ultimately can't really control much of anything, which I don't like that at all. Type A personalities, raise your hand. Okay, I'll raise my hand. Okay, and everybody's like, okay, is this going to be caught on YouTube or not? Okay, yeah, as a type A personality, a planner and a contingency planner and a contingency of a contingency planner like I am, this is not easy. The other key verse in Isaiah 30 is Isaiah 30, verse 18, which we've looked at before, because it's also the tension that exists throughout this entire book. When somebody bust out Isaiah 30, verse 18.
Therefore the Lord waits to be gracious to you, and therefore he exalts himself to show mercy to you. For the Lord is a God of justice.
Okay, for those of you keeping score at home, we got some loaded words here. What are some important words we just heard here in 30:18? Waits. Only time God is ever the subject of the verb to wait. And for God to wait, and we've talked about waiting before. Waiting isn't a wondering if something's going to happen. It's a delay. He's delaying to do what? And look at what he's delaying. We got some loaded words here. Gracious and showing mercy. Take a look at Exodus 34, verse 6. Exodus 34, verse 6. This is the equivalent of the Apostles' Creed in the Old Testament. Exodus 34, verse 6. Yeah. Yeah. I cheat. I just have to hit the right buttons on my iPad. The dangers of being in Old Testament studies, if you don't have it on an iPad, you injure yourself because the books are too heavy. You've seen it. Yeah, Hebrew Bibles are not for the faint of heart. So this is the creed of the Old Testament. The Lord passed before him and proclaimed, the Lord, a God who is what? Merciful and gracious, slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness. The problem that Isaiah stuck here with in Isaiah 30:18 is all of these things that we count on God to do, we're waiting for him to do them. Other questions? Exodus 34:6, mark that in your Bibles. Put about 5 post-it notes on it. It's really crazy important. It's one of those really important landmarks in the Old Testament. It shows up all over the place. The worst part of Isaiah 30:18 is the part that we haven't got into yet. Oh, God's a God of justice too. Justice, be careful how you define your terms. Justice, doing everything. Oh, justice is doing everything the way things were done back in Genesis 1 and 2. It's back to the good old days, back to the pre-sin days. And now the line that I really dislike. Blessed are all those who do what? Wait for him. Okay, it's a good thing it's a drizzle, not a thunderstorm. I might have been in trouble for that smirk, but so far so good. I did once make a comment teaching the book of Job, and on cue there was a lightning strike nearby. The congregation members were concerned that I might have overstated something. Yeah, I said, I don't particularly like Yahweh in this passage. And on cue, flash bag outside the, yeah. They didn't let me live that one down for years. This idea of blessed, it sounds like it's actually the same word that you would see in the Beatitudes in Matthew 5. Blessed are the poor in spirit. The gospel reading for this upcoming Sunday for All Saints. The word blessed is how to describe the good life. What's a person who's doing well? A person who is waiting for God. Not a fan. But this tension of waiting, knowing that it could happen anytime soon, but being stuck. Anything else that strikes you in these two important verses in Isaiah 30? Not quite to the point where I can assign you my book in Isaiah 30, but that's me being a snob. So Isaiah makes us do whiplash. He's going to injure us in terms of jumping topics. And you thought I was just the teacher in this class. We've gone from muck in the mire of all of the events of Assyria coming on the scene. And then 34 happens. Now 34 and 35 are going to be our major focal point. And these, in terms of the book of Isaiah, Isaiah 34 and 36 function as the center of the entire book. They link everything together. These are super important. To the point in which, I remember when stuff used to be only a couple years ago, now it's suddenly becoming more than a couple years ago. I actually took a course on exegesis of Isaiah for my PhD, and the whole course was, the professor had this, academics can be really dangerous because they come up with brilliant ideas that are really fun for them and cause pain and suffering to most of the students. He's like, I've decided that we're going to do the entire book of Isaiah through Isaiah 35. So the entire course was a verse of Isaiah 35 and tracing it through the rest of the book of Isaiah. 3 hours a week for it was semester, so 16 hours. Or no, it was a 3-hour lecture. It was him talking on untranslated Hebrew for 3 hours on a Wednesday afternoon. For about 3 of us, it was fun. For the MDiv students, and you could appreciate this, they died. Yeah, let's just see some really crazy untranslated Hebrew and just go. 34 and 35 especially is that important. But before we get to that, we got to get to 34. So take a look at 34, verse 1. Finally, yes, I promised. You're thinking, should we ever believe him when he says what text he's going to cover? Tech people currently have lost all faith, but that's good. 34, verse 1, somebody busted out.
Draw near, O nations, to hear, and give attention, O peoples. Let the earth hear and all that fills it, the world and all that comes from it.
Keep going. You're shocked that I said keep going, I know.
For the Lord is enraged against all the nations, and furious against all their hosts. He has devoted them to destruction, has given them over for slaughter.
Okay, that's enough. Woo! Once again, sue Isaiah for whiplash. We've gone from the events of about 705 BC, which is where kind of 28 to 31 are. That's Sennacherib coming to, getting ticked off at Jerusalem. And now what jumps out at you in these first two verses? 34 has just pulled us out of the muck and the mire of 705 BC. Or 70, yeah, whatever. I was a history major and I never did dates well. We got the whole bloomin' cosmos involved again. Anything that strikes you, bothers you here in verses 1 and 2?
All nations and all their hosts has been devoted to destruction.
Yeah. This is not just any coming judgment. It's not just Edom getting nabbed. It's comprehensive. All nations, all their host. Other things that anything bother you in these first couple of verses? Yeah, this is a kind of a PG-13 rated passage. One of the questions we need to be able to address here is what do we do with this language? I mean, for crying out loud, the Lord is enraged against his people. And I would love to say, enraged. Against all the nations, excuse me. Is what do we do with this kind of frightening image of divine wrath? And how do we wrestle with it? Because the one thing you can't do is turn this into a G-rated movie and avoid it. This is anything but G-rated. Take a look at verse 3. Their slain shall be cast out, the stench of their corpses shall rise. It gets better. And the mountains shall flow with their blood. Yikes. That giggle, by the way, to explain the giggle is not me thinking this is funny, this is me, wow. Just when you think you can see a text 100 times and you still can't quite get over how nasty, how rough it is. So we get the language of blood. So now let's start looking at our images here. So we're going to have in terms of 34. So we have a tale of two places. We have 34 and we're going to have 35. We'll save 35 for a bit. So we have what? We got the slain. We got blood. Blood in Isaiah is never a positive image. For those of you who faint at the sight of blood, you already realize why that would be a bad image. For those of you who have better stomachs, when I was doing hospital work, a trauma chaplain, the joke was, if you ever needed to get me out of a trauma bay, show me the needle and I'd get out of there really fast. It could be a gunshot wound, I was fine. Needle, I was gone in a heartbeat. So other images we've seen so far. As we start looking at these images. Yeah, corpses. Corpses, we got stench. I mean, look at how vivid this picture imagery is. Verse 4, the host of heaven shall rot. So we got rot. This list keeps getting better. As leaves and their hosts shall fall, as leaves fall from the vine, leaves falling from the fig tree. Okay, that's appropriate for the fall. We have this scene of cosmic judgment here. And now we get into take a look at verse 5. What's the image we see now in verse 5? And verses 5 and 6. Okay, verse 5, we finally get to who the fuss is about. Who shows up in verse 5? Edom. And along those lines, we have some wonderful, sword language is now added to our list of images. We kind of saw this with Moab back in 25. But look, so what do you know? Okay. This is always the fun thing to ask. Tell me about Edom. Okay, blank stares. Good. Blank stares. Yeah, what's up with Edom? Yeah, okay. So Edom is now becoming a very important pattern in the Old Testament. Pastor McDowell's like, of course the guy who's writing an Obadiah commentary would say that. Well, so we're talking about Esau. What do you recall about good old Esau? You're like, finally back to stories we have a chance at knowing, as opposed to throwing us in the middle of some place in Isaiah. We got the great wrestling match. Beware of redheads, at least in the case of Esau. Esau is...
Sold his birthright for some lentils.
Yeah, sold his birthright. Hey, don't knock that. Have you tasted my lentils? You haven't. If you were to taste my dal, I make dal like a pro. So, yeah. What's great, the birthright thing is actually pretty funny. So the name Edom So Esau, Edom is actually a word play in the Hebrew word for red, and also the Hebrew word for blood. Note all the blood language here in Isaiah 34. It's playing with the language of Edom. Is the red-headed guy sells his birthright for red stuff, which is kind of a very, yeah, no kidding. I have my Indian grocery here in town. He also becomes this classic opponent of, he also becomes an opponent of Jacob. So actually last Wednesday, and I'm teaching Pentateuch, or just got done teaching Pentateuch 1. We did Jacob and Esau, and I managed to not talk about Jacob at all, covering Jacob and Esau last. Yeah, okay, that might have been a little bit of a bias. So Esau already, in terms of foreign nations, we know far more so about the origins of Edom than we know about anybody else. So like we know Moab had this little bit of, well, the old incest episode between Lot and his daughters. So we have other origin stories. But we know more about Esau as a character compared to any other foreign nation. It goes on forever. It's a big chunk of Genesis. What else do we know about? What are Esau's descendants known for? Was it your ordination text? Apparently not. Okay. They hire Balaam. They oppose the Exodus. The people said, "Look, we're your brothers. Could you let us through?" And in the ancient Near East, if a brother needs help, you help him. Social obligations. And what do they say? No. They become these nasty opponents during the Exodus. And they hire Balaam. And Balaam's talking donkey, which is another Bible study. And then the author of, actually take a look at Hebrews chapter 12. Yeah, yes, I do know the New Testament. So Hebrews 12. To just see where this figure of Esau, Edom ends up. It's very easy to do a study on, if you want to do an easy study, do every occurrence of Esau in the New Testament. There aren't many. So, take a look at Hebrews 12:16 to see how the author of Hebrews uses this Esau figure. Esau, by the way, appears a whopping 3 times in the New Testament. So my kids should have been more impressed when I said I wrote on every occurrence of Esau in the New Testament. And they asked me how many. I said 3, and they were less than impressed. Somebody bust out Hebrews 12, verse 16. Give me a chance to, I guess, not caffeinate.
That no one is sexually immoral or unholy like Esau, who sold his birthright for a single meal.
Yeah. Esau, the author of Hebrews uses Esau brilliantly. Esau becomes this great pattern of all that's wrong in the world. When you bump into Esau and Edom, so Esau and his descendants, the Edomites, they become the bad guy in the Old Testament. The New Testament uses it a little bit. Hebrews uses it twice. Romans 9 is a different beast. Edom becomes, if you want to describe everything that's wrong in the world, you use the nation Edom. On top of it, since they are the brother of Jacob, they're also the ones who fail to help when they should. In terms of, if you're looking for nasty, violent language in the Bible, Edom gets the worst. More than any, you would think Assyria should get nailed more, because Assyria, we've talked about them, they're R-rated. Forget PG-13. They're scary dudes. nothing compared to what gets done to Edom. Both here in Isaiah 34 and also in Isaiah 63 that we'll get to in about 2 months. Don't worry, we're not going to go 2 months. Don't panic. Okay. So now Edom here becomes the pattern of everything that's awful. Edom's sins, by the way, you would think their sins, if they're Edomites, they should be accused of idolatry. They have 2 major sins that they get accused of. Isaiah, by the way, mentions none of them. They get accused of pride, thinking they're gods. They get accused of betraying their brother. Those are the 2. In other words, they break both the first table and the second table of the 10 Commandments. Okay, back to the imagery. The Lord has this, look at verse 6. Now, what strikes you here in verse 6? There's a great sacrifice going on, and Edom's on the altar. This is, as you skim through it, just take a couple moments to look ahead in these first, 8 verses, because we better get to Isaiah 35 after this mess. Take a look at verse 8. So 34, verse 8, and we'll go 8 and 9. Ooh, hard words for us to deal with. For the Lord has what? A day of and a year of recompense. I hate the word recompense because I don't use that ever in a sentence. What strikes you about this vengeance language? How does that make you feel hearing it? I know, feeling questions, always a dangerous thing to do when we're socially distanced and haven't had a chance to have enough coffee together to get to know each other. What strikes you about vengeance? How does God sound when we talk about God having vengeance? God's revenge. Actually, vengeance is not the same as revenge.
That is not a Lord I want to be missing.
Yeah, and doesn't it sound like God is just a petty tyrant? Hey, if somebody hits you, what do? What should you not do? Hit them back. This language of vengeance is actually a pretty troubling one. It makes God seem kind of petty. God's just out to get people. That word for vengeance, and the other word closely connected to it, God's a jealous God, we actually see that in Exodus, is a way of describing a God who is determined, who won't let evil stand. The way that we use the word revenge or vengeance, it just makes it petty. And the other thing with that word vengeance is God is only ever the subject of it. It's only God the one who's doing it. We are not vigilantes. We trust that God's going to defeat evil. Any other questions on vengeance? The language gets worse. What happens to the streams of Edom? Oh, by the way, geography lesson. Okay, hopefully you're cultured enough to know Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. I know it's pop culture, it's pretty recent history. From, 88, I think? Recent, pop culture, Dr. Ryan M. Teets style, which is not that pop at all. Students who don't know what the TV show Cheers is, they should be ashamed of themselves. Okay. If you recall, Petra is what was actually used. So the final scene where the ark is hidden, down that great valley, and you get that great scene, the great, I forget the name of the building. In Petra, that area that they filmed the final bit of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, that's actually where Edom was originally located. Edom is not the garden spot of the universe. Edom goes from the Dead Sea to cliffs that are about 4,000 feet high in a very short period of time, short distance. They are steep, nasty, rocky cliffs that can't support much life on a good day. So that's when the people were hearing Edom, they were thinking of, the Badlands of South Dakota would be probably a good American metaphor for them. Good luck going in there because you might not get out. So now, the streams of Edom are going to become what? Flip the page. And the tech people are shocked that I'm still staying on. Turned into pitch and her soil sulfur, and her land will become a burning pitch. What does that sound like?
Sounds like fire.
Not just any fire.
Volcanic.
There's a special word being used there. The word for pitch shows up only in one other, in reference to only one other famous or infamous two cities in the Bible. This is the stuff of Sodom and Gomorrah. They're getting the Sodom and Gomorrah treatment. And because of that, so now let's, I forgot to keep score. Sodom and Gomorrah. I can never spell Gomorrah, so we'll just do a scribble. That's how I spelled Gomorrah, just so you know. Isaiah uses Sodom and Gomorrah language, starting actually in chapter 1, as a way of describing the worst sin and the most complete punishment. So Isaiah actually calls the people, you rulers of Sodom, you princes of Gomorrah in Isaiah 1. By the way, if God ever calls you ruler of Sodom, princes of Gomorrah, that's not a compliment, just in case you were concerned. Now, what do you notice about these critters? So we get our Sodom and Gomorrah language. Who's living in this place?
Hawks and porcupines.
Hawks, porcupines, owls, and ravens. Nevermore. What do these critters have in common? These are all the wild beasts, non-domesticated animals. As a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, I do not like the Ravens at all, but that's a slightly different Raven. All of these scary wild animals. So, who's going to live there? We got the wild animals, and we got the unclean. And by unclean, that means people who cannot stand in the presence of God. Okay. And to wrap up Isaiah 30, what grows there? Take a look at 13. We got thorns. Nettles and thistles. Jackals or dragons, ostriches, oh my. All of this piling on of images. Hyenas, goats. The word for nightbird there is probably a reference to a she-demon. For those of you who are familiar with the pop culture phenomenon that didn't happen last summer called Lilith Fair, the word for wild bird for nightbird is Lilith, probably a she-demon. Edom has been turned into chaos land. It is the worst possible thing imaginable. And just so we don't spend all of our time on the worst possible thing imaginable, which would be probably bad form on my part, we better get to Isaiah 35. Any other questions, though? It becomes just this piling on of imagery. We got quite a scribble here. Yeah, so make sure we put, okay, one other thing I want to make sure we have here, vengeance is here. Okay, Isaiah 35. Deep cleansing breath. Let's practice our yogic breathing or whatever we need to do at this point. Okay, that's probably not yogic. Okay. I do not have the attention span for that. Somebody look at verse 1. Somebody bust out Isaiah 35, verse 1. Because what are our images here? We've had wild animals, unclean, slain corpses, blood, sword, stench, Sodom and Gomorrah, oh my, rot, thorns, and vengeance. And bye-bye Edom. Somebody bust out verse 1.
The wilderness and the dry land shall be glad. The desert shall rejoice and blossom like the crocus.
Whoa. How does this verse make you feel? I know, is it okay to talk feelings? At the seminary, they freak out sometimes when I say that. Who shows up again? We have wilderness talk. What do you notice about the wilderness here? How wilderness is this wilderness in verse 1? And verse 2 even. What do you associate with wilderness talk? Wilderness is what? A place that you're lucky to eke out an existence, don't get lost. I mean, Moses was there for how many years? What, 40 years because he failed to ask for directions. He was there for a long time. Wilderness is marginalized existence. It's where we don't belong. And now here, what's it doing? Rejoicing and blossoming. What kind of wilderness is this? We go from the worst possible wilderness in 34. God's enemies being reduced to as bad of an image as you can imagine. To now we have wilderness that's behaving badly. Verse 2, what jumps out at you? So it's the wilderness rejoices. What else does it do? Blossoms. Blossoms. It sings. The image that Isaiah is actually drawing from is, okay, it's an image that doesn't play well in Indiana, and I've never lived in the desert. If you've seen pictures of the desert right after a rain, everything just blooms because it can. This bursting forth.
We were in Phoenix, right, when the flowers were
Oh,
blooming.
awesome.
And I always thought, everything's dead and dry.
And then,
I went there and
poof.
everything's green, it's beautiful.
Yeah, and just that, the rain hits it and pow. This is, Israel's semi-arid. This is what they would experience on a regular basis. When there's rain, look out world, we got a party. Now, Glory of Lebanon, loaded term. Lebanon has nothing to do with Lebanon, Indiana, thank goodness. For those of you who know, is that by Indy, right? I think I remember you always stopping there on the way to Indy growing up. Okay, take a look at, what do you associate with Lebanon? Other than the fact there's a... Lebanon, yeah. Yeah. Lebanon is your stock image for fertility. It's the good place. For me, the word cedar has always been a hard one to grasp because I'm used to the scrub cedars we see around here. We saw them in Missouri too. It's the good spot. It's one of 3 words that you should get excited about when you bump into them. I think we actually bump into another one. Yeah, speaking of which, the Glory of Lebanon, what comes after Lebanon? Sharon and Carmel. Carmel, nothing to do with Carmel, Indiana, sorry. It's like random Indiana place names. It's kind of funny. So we have Lebanon here. Lebanon is anything but wilderness. Carmel and Sharon. Carmel, or as they say here in the Hoosier State, what, Carmel? I'm from Indiana, I can belly ache about this. We do not do the English language pleasant things. We say rough instead of roof, for crying out loud. And Sharon. All of these, the other place you would throw in there, and I don't think it appears here in Isaiah 35. No, it doesn't. If you ever bump into Lebanon, Carmel, Sharon, the other place would be Bashan, by the way. These are all the great garden spots that the people would have known of. And they're anything but wilderness. And what do they see now? So now we have wilderness that is behaving quite badly. What do they see? My eyes have seen the coming of the glory of the Lord. Okay, bad singing. Not nearly as bad as my daughter wanted to taunt me with What a Friend We Have in Jesus in the car this morning. Not a fan. Sorry. They see the glory of the Lord. Okay, what's going on here? We got wilderness talk. We got the glory of the Lord dwelling in the wilderness. What really important Old Testament story does this sound a heck of a lot like? Glory in the wilderness. Let's keep going. So we got glory. Next up, verse 4, what strikes you? This is great. Strengthen the weak hands and make firm the feeble knees. Say to those with a anxious heart, do what? Be strong, don't be afraid. Oh. Behold, your God will come with what? Okay. I'm going to go high-tech, multicolored. Look out, world. This is high-tech, by the way. Okay. Vengeance here. What was vengeance like in Isaiah 34? Pretty scary stuff, I think is the technical word for it. Mass slaughter. Yeah. Okay. And now here, we got vengeance. But why is vengeance, but how is vengeance being portrayed here? He will come and, so look, and it's actually two for the price of one. We had vengeance and recompense in Isaiah 34. We have vengeance and recompense in Isaiah 35. Vengeance means God is saving. That word vengeance, and I don't know, I'm still working on a better word for it. Vengeance for us is just too negatively loaded. Determination to save is actually probably a better way of understanding what vengeance, when God is doing vengeance. Determining to save and punish evil. We had the punishing of evil here, and now, behold what? Not just any God. Who's coming? Your God. It's the cry of faith. It gets better. I'll take a deep breath. Sorry. This is crazy talk here. This is absolute crazy talk. And the camera's loving trying to catch up with me right now. I do try to get 1,000 steps whenever I teach. So hopefully I'm getting close to my 1,000-step margin. Got to get those power of vitality rewards from my health plan. Other things that just strike you here. We've gone from, if you think about 34 was just, kept getting worse. And 35 just keeps getting better. What images really do you like a lot? Which ones resonate with you? Because you got a bunch here. Verse 5. Oh, this just gets better. Then the eyes of the blind shall be opened and the ears of the deaf unstopped. If you're hearing Jesus' ministry here, you are hearing correctly. And now we get into I think that's eyes opened. The only miracle unique to Jesus without an Old Testament example. So the Old Testament, we do have dead being raised in the Old Testament. We have miraculous feedings. We even have lepers being cleansed. To talk to Nahum about that. The only miracle unique to Jesus is opening the eyes of the blind. Why do you think that's the case? It's really, I can give you examples of pretty much every other miracle, but Jesus opening the eyes of the blind is unique to Jesus. What do you think blindness and deafness symbolize in the Old Testament, in the Bible? Caught myself there. Take a look at, yeah.
Be separated from society and from God. You couldn't hear the word or see the miracles.
Yeah. Let's make it even worse. Unbelief. Whenever you see language of blindness and deafness in the Bible, it symbolizes unbelief. So what's happening to the unbelievers? It sounded a heck of a lot like good old third article of the Apostles' Creed in the Small Catechism. Best line ever. I believe that what? I cannot believe. I believe that by my own reason or strength I believe that I cannot by my own. We sneak in that by my own reason or strength there to break up the cool line, by the way. I believe that I cannot believe. Oh, so eyes opened equals faith. So when Jesus opens the eyes of the blind, what is he doing? He's bringing them back to the community. He's allowing them to see Jesus. He's giving them faith. Okay, it gets better. Lame leap like a deer, the tongue of the mute sing for joy. Next line's weird. For waters are going to do what? How good is this wilderness? What kind of wilderness is this, for crying out loud? How wild is this wilderness? We have waters. And this is good waters, by the way. And springs. If you're thinking about the wilderness and the history of God's people, any event where we spend about 40 years in the wilderness come to mind. Isaiah here is taking us back to the Exodus. So we talk about images of salvation, how I started off things this evening. We had our Zion theology, big Zion talk. Could have gone a couple other directions too. Is what Isaiah in 35 is doing is giving us the language of the Exodus to describe our salvation. So first Exodus, how did things go? What Moses failed to ask for directions, no GPS, took him an extra 40 years. That's probably not what's in the text, but we'll go with it. It takes a long time. How does water work out during the first Exodus? It's a good thing you got a rock. Just don't hit it twice or you're in trouble. It's slow. Opposition. It takes forever. In the new Exodus, this new story of salvation that's coming, it's the Exodus, but now it's the Mark McGuire of the Exodus. It's the Exodus on steroids. It's just amazing. And now take a look at verse 8. To really get us into our Exodus language. What's going to show up here? A highway. We got a road, and what kind of road is it?
Way of holiness.
We got the Holy Way. A little bit different than Lake Avenue that I take over here. I was wondering if the construction was still going on, and then I looked out your parking lot. Yeah, it's still going on it's really going on. We don't have any road. It's not just any road. What's missing on the road? The language of fool is a weird one. Nothing to do with teenagers. So when you think about what we've seen, though, with the lame walking, the blind seeing, think about how many New Testament examples we have of this. When Christ shows up, all of this promise in Isaiah 35 starts happening. The unclean shall pass over it. First Exodus, you had a rabble. This Exodus, it's only for the remnant. And who's missing? Verse 9 is great. No lion shall be there, nor any ravenous beast shall come upon it. They shall not be found there, but only the redeemed shall walk. Lion language, we've talked about this before. Along with tigers and bears, oh my, lions are connected to warfare, bad stuff, and lots of nastiness. Not generally a positive image. And instead of this first Exodus, which was, took forever, we go from Exodus, and who shows up at the tail end? And the ransomed of the Lord will return and come to Zion with singing. Everlasting joy will be on their heads. Take a look. Take a look at the Transfiguration, Luke's Gospel. And if you can find it faster than me, go. One of those moments that I wish I could have eavesdropped in on. You're like, he must be an inveterate eavesdropper. You're kind of right. I take a look at it. It's about Luke. Let's see, I think it's Luke 11. Or no, Luke 11. Lord's Prayer, also a good part of Luke. 9. Okay, thank you. I was going to keep scrolling forward. We could have been here for a while. Luke 9 is important. So Transfiguration. The conversation is everything. So verse 31 of Luke 9. Behold, 2 men were talking with him, Moses and Elijah, and they appeared in glory and spoke about his departure. If you click on your nice little footnote in your ESV, what do you see that by the word departure? Exodus. They are talking about Jesus accomplishing what Israel never could for the sake of Israel, for the sake of us. Their conversation, and when you look at Jesus' ministry, Matthew, out of Egypt I have called my son. Jesus' whole ministry starts where? Not ministry. Runs from Bethlehem to Egypt. He goes from Egypt. What's his next stop? He's baptized where? Jordan, in the wilderness, Dead Sea. And he traces that whole path to the Exodus. The first Exodus was all about liberation from slavery to Pharaoh. This new Exodus that Jesus accomplishes and that Isaiah here just gives us this glorious picture of is the Exodus that takes us away from bondage to sin, death, and the devil. I mean, this is just glorious stuff. Deep breath. I know it is a gloomy, cold sort of day. I have to admit, it did break my heart. I had been reading with a hoodie all day today. I'm like, man, I got to actually look pretty for a few moments. I'll go back to I only recently discovered hoodies only about a year ago. It took me that long. I can't believe it. Yeah, my son's like, wow, Dad, you should do more often. Hoodie and I was more of a flannel circa 1990s sort of kid. Anything else just strikes you? You talk about two strong contrasts here in 34 and 35. We got Edom as that evil function compared to this new Exodus. So we're down to our final 2 weeks, which is kind of nuts. I feel like time right now plays weird tricks. I can't keep track of days, much less anything else. Next week, we're going to get into the end game. So we're actually going to jump over a lot of Isaiah. We'll look at a little bit of Isaiah 40 and take a look at the servant. If we're going to talk about Isaiah, got to talk about the servant. But we're going to spend our final 2 weeks in these almost last chapters of Isaiah. So 63, 64, and 65. I'll give you a couple highlights to get us there. And then we will use that for our final 2 weeks. Deep breath, lots of processing. You talk about the wilderness. Sometimes the strange land of the Old Testament is definitely one of them. We close with the Lord's blessing. Almighty God, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit be with us all. Amen. That's a